Hi everyone, for what will be a first for EchoSync Virtual Reality, we are now going to do a tour of Northley Roman Villa in the West Oxfordshire Cotswolds. So Northley Roman Villa, we can see here, is set against the backdrop of some gorgeous hills. It's in a river valley, and in the 1st century AD, a Roman villa was built in this farmland by what would have been a very well-to-do Roman family, albeit when I say Roman, the people who lived here were probably British originally, but adopted a Roman lifestyle in what would have been a farming community. The house here that you can see is quite big. It wouldn't be one of the biggest in Roman Britain, but certainly on the larger side. To orientate you to the villa itself, we have what would have been a courtyard in the middle here. So you can see this is the back of the Roman villa, and then you'd have a flank down the side down there, all those grass, and this was another flank down over there. At the front over there would have been the gate, the main way that people came in and received visitors. What's interesting about Northley Roman Villa, as we come over to this side of the site, is there were actually baths at the site, marking it out as what would have been quite a posh gaff. Here you can see some of the remains of what would have been the hypercore system, which was essentially the underfloor heating of its day. What happened here was hot air was blown underneath the house to keep it warm, and that was generated by fires that were normally fanned by kind of slaves underground. Unfortunately, there was slavery in Roman times, and there would have been slaves operating here on the farmland or other such areas locally, probably working inside. But anyway, as you can see here, we've got an amazing array of standing foundations that would have been. This is the kind of, I guess, the posh kind of bath corner of the house, and then over to that direction over there we have what would have been the dining room, where they would have received guests locally. Walk towards what would have been the kind of dining over the site. It's worth just touching a little bit on the Roman history of the area. So in the 1st century AD, following Claudius's invasion, Britain became part of the Roman Empire. The Roman Empire then left Britain. Well, I wouldn't say left, it kind of rather dissipated, shall we say, in the 5th century AD, if not slightly earlier, when the legions started leaving Britain in the wake of kind of greater troubles closer to home, and equally greater kind of Saxon invasion and influence. The Rome didn't necessarily fall in the UK, it rather decayed and crumbled, which is when this villa would have probably become something a bit different. I'm sure people probably still lived here, albeit not quite in the same style that the Romans did. The Anglo-Saxons were notably more sophisticated than people make them out to be, but they probably didn't exude the same kind of level of Roman decadence that we would necessarily expect. In fact, it's interesting to note that the Romans, albeit under very different circumstances, lived probably not an utterly dissimilar life to the lives that people maybe in the late medieval period, wealthy people in the late medieval period, they had probably similar structure. They were able to live a relatively comfortable life with relative comfort, kind of decent food, decent dining, and a kind of hospitable home. Anyway, what I should say very briefly about the area over here. So this is still in the posh. I'm currently standing in the dining room, and to my in this building over here we have what remains of a mosaic that I can't unfortunately get into at the moment. The mosaic here marks the site as being quite grand. That a mosaic was quite an expensive thing to produce and pull together. This one here is, but doesn't necessarily depict kind of any kind of grand scenes of Greek mythology or Roman mythology or anything like that. It's to describe it as plain is possibly unfair, but it depicts kind of various patterns and shapes that you can see on the board here. But it's not got kind of Hercules battling with the Hydra or anything like that, or anything else that might have been in a mosaic. Anyway, if we carry on taking a tour down over here, we get to some more of the buildings, and then what we'll do is we'll walk round to the courtyard, where we'll then look up at what would have been the main entrance into the Roman villa, and we can look at what people would have seen as they would have entered the as they would have entered the villa. Interesting, the farmland around here probably would have been predominantly used for livestock. There's probably some arable cultivation as well, albeit that would have been different to what we know now. But you can see here that kind of woodland is relatively old, relatively ancient, and the Romans probably interacted with the landscape in not utterly dissimilar way to how we do now. The West Oxfordshire Cotswolds are renowned for having a predominantly chalk soil, which, whilst not great for growing crops, certainly isn't necessarily terrible either. The ploughs cut into a lot of limes, what we call Cotswold brash, so kind of limestone, chalky soil that doesn't necessarily lend itself particularly well to very deep growing, but it certainly has enough proponents to do some. So if we come down over here, we can see a beautiful mock-up of what the courtyard may have looked like. Notably, some coins have been found here and other kind of interesting things. Anyway, this has been a bit of a kind of proof and concept of a demo of EchoSync VR's heritage things, heritage platform and systems. But anyway, I hope you found this interesting. I hope you've enjoyed situating yourself within the context of a Roman landscape and finding out a little bit more about the history of the area. Thank you very much.